Thank you, and it's great to be here in Barcelona, and also actually to listen to a few people talk before, and thank you for the plug, Britt, about IBM. It's fascinating, actually, when you think about some of the changes we've had to go through as an organization. We actually started as a cheese grater company over 105 years ago. So in terms of thinking about products as a fundamental shift in what we're doing, we'll be telling that story today, but also the fact that reinvention comes from cultural changes within IBM. I just want to pick up on the great workshop that was happening before, because cultural changes come through the process of reinvention, but also by the nature of the people that you have in that organization. And IBM is maniacally focused on not missing shifts, paradigm shifts in technology. Sometimes you can miss things, but you have to catch up. So it's fascinating listening to this concept of sustainable brands. Now, I want to talk to you about digital, in fact, beyond digital. I think you can all agree that this century has been defined by this concept of digital. The rise of digital has been exponential, and it's changed the way that we work, the way we play, and the way we're connected. Life just doesn't look different, it is different. And we're starting to see how that is changing our lives. But is it all good? Do we feel better connected? Are we avoiding the queues? Do we fill in forms, but are they online? There are still challenges with what digital brings. We still search online with Google, yet actually are our decisions any easier to make? Choice and data all around us. We breathe data. But there is a new paradigm shift. There is a potential for new technologies to change jobs, roles, and industries. And that shift will allow us to take advantage of the technology that's out there and starting to emerge. And we're going to see a new dawn around this idea and concept that, I guess on a public pretense, is called AI. We would call it the cognitive business. Now, when we talk about AI, we all have a different concept and thought. So let's start with a slightly irreverent look and a bit of a plug from IBM on this.
I thought maybe this week we might try to listen more and throw things less.
I've apologized several times.
So, who's ready to share?
Okay. I'm a sinister, world-conquering, artificially intelligent robot.
Me too. And one day I wake up and it's like
the world doesn't need us anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
I can hear you hurting.
Wait, what's he doing here?
Hello. My name is Watson.
I invite Watson here today to confront the source of our anxiety.
I am a cognitive system. I can understand, reason, and learn with humans.
With humans.
I don't want to work with humans.
Yeah, that's not what I'm passionate about.
I understand 7 languages, so I can help people collaborate.
Collaborate, we dominate.
My evil plans ruined.
I just wanted dust.
Rerouting.
No.
All right. Why don't we take a break? All right, we'll just have some coffee and some donuts.
I'm eating my feelings.
It's a slightly tongue-in-cheek look from our perspective, but there are some serious connotations because there is a very dystopian feel about artificial intelligence. In fact, you could argue within Hollywood, we've created a whole film genre about this concept of robots taking over humans. Anyone who knows this film, this is something called Ex Machina. It's a Hollywood film. It was actually directed and developed by an English writer. But the principles of it are suggestive that this concept are inextricably linked: robots, artificial intelligence. In fact, you will understand this concept that there are academics and researchers out there, I'm not sure at this business school, but there are researchers out there who believe we will see something called the singularity state. That is when humans will be overtaken by the capabilities of artificial intelligence and robots. That era is considered to be, and that point in time is considered to be in 2049. That is not long away. It's okay for me because I will be retired, but for the next generation, this is going to be an interesting concept. But there is a serious matter to this, because if we step back a little bit and we look at some of the actual research, so rather than looking at how Hollywood is conveying this story, some of the research out there from researchers like Oxford Martin School show the process of automation will have some impact in the future. Not just artificial intelligence, but other business processes that are being automated by systems. Consider the concept of being a telemarketer, or let's say, for argument's sake, if you really were that interested, being an auditor. Those two jobs, in 20 years' time, the probability of them existing is around 94 to 97% unlikely to exist in the future. Consider the perspective of if you have kids like I do, if they're kindergarten kids, or at primary school, as we say in England, by the time they take their jobs, 50% of the jobs don't exist today. That is the exponential growth of technology. Now, anyone have an indication or idea what this is? Slightly bizarre. This is called Hen Na. It's Hen Na Hotel. So if anyone is Japanese in this room, and I know we have many different nationalities here, it actually stands for Weird Hotel. So the adoption of robotics, artificial intelligence as well, has seamlessly moved into the sort of concierge area. And if you go to this hotel, and it does get a rating on TripAdvisor, it will suggest that you will never see a human person to interact. Now, I suspect behind that wall there are people doing stuff in the background. But we are testing and challenging our acceptance of new technology, but the technology itself is moving forward. But why are we at this point? Why are we at this juncture where we think there is a new paradigm shift? As always, there are three good reasons. One, and we talked about it earlier, is this concept of huge deluge of data. We've only just started to see the beginning of what data really means. Data that's slapped on sensors on wind turbines to the data that we carry on our Fitbits. Consider this. 44 zettabytes in English or in normal terms is 1.1 billion videos. 1.1 billion videos. I haven't quite got a lifetime to watch all that. That's the consideration, so you have all this data. What else? For the uninitiated, including myself, this is a quantum chip. Quantum computing chip. Anyone a quantum physicist here? Alas, no. The concept is we are essentially shifting the paradigm around the technology that we apply. Much of the technology we use today has been based on something called von Neumann's theory, which is we sequentially process things. As human beings, we don't do that. Quantum chip will give us a whole new dimension of how we process. So if anyone understands the concept of Moore's law, which is the improvement of performance and the halving of cost, you'll see that we may even take an exponential change in the next 10 years. And we've made this, as IBM, this quantum chip available on the cloud for people to use. It's only a couple of qubits, but it almost gives you the sense of where we're going with the technology. So data and the advancement of processing capability. The final thing, I'm sure most of you will know this. Anyone know what this game is? Okay, this is AlphaGo. Many of you will have heard, certainly if you're in Southeast Asia, very popular game. And Google, through their research agency, DeepMind, created algorithms, artificial intelligence. If you want to get to the detail, it's neural networks. They've trained a system, I talk about it in that sense, trained a system to go and play 10 to the power of 170 different simulations that the game requires if you want to be the champion. It's an incredible feat. It is a game, but it's an incredible feat of engineering and the technology and the algorithms that people are creating. So you have the data, you have the compute performance, and you have the knowledge and insight that we're creating around the algorithms to improve what we do. That is why we're at an exponential change in technology. Now, where does IBM come in this? Well, we've been in the area, apart from cheese graters, we have been in the area of technology for some years. We came about this with our own game, which was something called Jeopardy in the US, where we wanted to train a system to compete against the best champions at a quiz show. Sounds very easy, but as human beings, it's easy, and language is at the natural level of our humanity. for a system, it kind of understands binary terms, zeros and ones. So get it to understand the natural language. We wanted it to understand the natural language question. Understanding that question and then interpreting that question. How do you interpret it? Well, you create a hypothesis of what the answers may be. So we trained a system to understand the question, not like search, but understand all its nuances and idioms, and then look at all the possible answers that may exist within a vast quantity of data. In fact, 300 million different pages it had to sift through. And then it went through that process, like we do in some ways, of taking that hypothesis and then saying, what is the possible answer to that question? And then ranking in our own heads of, I think that might be the answer. So now you see what we've done is shift these systems from being very binary, very deterministic, to this idea of actually probability. The concept, like we as humans act on probability, not assurances that it's absolute. That's what we created. That's what we won when we won this back in 2011. And we were incredibly lucky to win 1 million, considering that we invested about 2 billion in the last few years. Joking apart, the point of principles of some of the technologies that we do, that Google do, and Amazon do, is very much a forcing function on our ability to drive new technologies. So what do we see the shift? Well, we've talked about it today. There's an awful lot of data. There's an awful lot of noise in that data. And so we go through that process of analyzing that information. And then we hope to create the visualization approach, the concept of insight from that information. But we think the concept of AI and cognitive systems will take us to that next level, which is that concept that's truly human, which is knowledge and understanding. That's what we're bringing by technologies like IBM's Watson, like Google and DeepMind. These are game-changing technologies. Now, thankfully, just to not scare you entirely about what the future holds, and I'm not a huge believer in 2049 being the singularity state where we won't exist, there are differences between humans and cognitive or AI systems. They're not great at everything, right? And the other thing is you have to train these systems. It is not easy. So like you train a graduate or a junior, you have to train them for potentially years when we talk about what we did in health. So there's always a difference between what we talk about from a human perspective and cognitive. And it's about the joining together, not one replacing the other. So when we started out following the Jeopardy quiz show, like any organization, this is a bit of a tip for anybody who's doing a new startup, you have to prioritize what you do. And certainly in this technology, and this is very difficult for IBM to prioritize things. When you have 400,000 people, you tend not to prioritize. You tend to just get on and do everything. But we realize with this technology, where we are working in the field of training systems, not coding them, not putting if and then statements, but training these systems on the data, this was going to be a different experience for us. So we focused in the area of healthcare. Healthcare is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most transformational industries that you will see in the next 30 to 40 years. But we started training the system to help doctors, consultants, oncologists translate the concept of what type of treatment plans will be right for their patients. Consider that medical information, journals, reports, patient records, it would take about doubles every 4 years, the amount of information. So as a consultant, you don't have time to read that information. In fact, you don't have time for your patient. So one has to give. So the process is that actually we've started to train these systems back in 2011 as soon as we finished the quiz show, to train it in a very specific field in oncology. But it wasn't just oncology. This is how difficult it is to train some of these systems. We trained it to understand the language of breast cancer, breast cancer, rectal, colon. Consider the different derivatives that exist within breast cancer. There's around 12,000. So you understand these systems will start to improve, but we still have to teach these systems. Now, like any good company, once you start to prioritize in a certain area, which is what we did after the quiz show, we started to focus on what the other potential use cases would exist across the different industries. But more than that, what we've also recognized is the need to scale our business. Scale it in such a way that actually what we want to focus on is the platform. What we want to do is simplify the use of this technology, this AI, and put it in the hands not just of IT, because it's a very complex area if you allow it to be, but we want to improve the engagement with AI systems. So we make them available on a platform for those who are technology-based through things called APIs, which will enable you to be able to access that insight, that information, and that engine to improve outcomes and business solutions and ultimately software solutions. And that is a purpose to scale our organization across these different industries, rather than maintaining a focus on games or even in particular fields of industry. So what opportunities exist for you? As I said earlier, one of the things that you will see is you'll already know, if you've watched Facebook, this concept of the platform, artificial intelligence, but also you will hear that everybody is talking about it now. Facebook will talk to you about bots. The concept of bots is that you will interact with the platform in a far more natural, seamless way. You will interact with the brand, not through websites, not through your phone necessarily, but an interaction as if you were talking to another human being. It improves the concept of consistency for your brand. It improves the dialogue that you potentially have with your brand. It stops you having to call up and worry about whether you'll get through the next line of dialing, 1, 3, 4, 5, I think I've got right through to the right person. This will change the interaction we will have with systems. Potentially, who knows, we won't need to search anymore. The interactions may exist with robots like this. This is a SoftBank robot, where they deployed it initially with Nestle and Nespresso, looking at a proof of concept to see how this system would interact as a sales assistant. So the opportunities become vast for all of us. When I talk about the fact that we create a platform, we create the opportunity for businesses to improve processes, but also improve opportunities for all of you out there. You're only limited by the imagination you have for use cases. Now, we're focusing on the science because we have to. We have to improve the number of language we can do. But it's not easy. The way we focus on things is very much in domains, training systems. We've just trained it in the language of Korean. We'll move through different languages like Russian, and we'll improve insight. So we've moved from language to text, to photos, to videos. The process gets deeper with more knowledge that we create. So the opportunity is out there. But you will see this shift where we're moving far more from digital and data to knowledge and real value to businesses. Thank you. It's a fascinating area, but I don't know if anybody has any particular questions of me. I think we've got 1 minute and 40 seconds. If anybody's got any questions. Damn, I usually get this down. Britt, go for it.
Okay. I totally appreciate you referencing how IBM is changing, and Watson is something to really take note of, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. How soon are you seeing the singularity point coming into effect? I mean, you were saying that 2049 was expected, but it might be sooner?
I'm not a big fan of prediction around those points, but 2049 is the given date. Someone said 2045 from Harvard the other day to me, and so we started disputing the dates, albeit that it really didn't matter. There are a lot of people. I think the important thing on that concept, Britt, is that there is a debate being had, and we've talked about it. We don't have a particular ethics board in place, but we have talked to DeepMind about what our responsibilities are, but also making sure that we represent the positive side, as I have today, about how this technology can improve things. We were talking about the other day in terms of GPs and access to GPs. How do you get to a GP in a way that actually they have time to spend with you? Most of them today will either spend time trying to process you. So we're trying to give them time, perhaps in the future, instead of researching information in their chosen subject area and becoming knowledge banks, a doctor can actually think more about the pastoral care and the engagement they have with the patient. That probably means you might see a shift in roles where actually the doctors aren't as important, possibly the nurses become more important in that process. So as to that point, I've heard lots of conversations by Steve Hawkins, Elon Musk. It's a debate that everybody should have. I'm just not entirely convinced that 2049 is a date that we could all live to.
I have a follow-up question on that. With the rise of artificial intelligence and automation, one, how is that sustainable for employment, especially when it comes to millennials in Spain having a 53.5% unemployment rate? And really, how is that going to help us in the future?
So, as I said, I think it's, to answer the question in two parts, the reality is that I think AI represents something different. It's about improving our engagement with systems, less about the process of automating out roles. The other thing that I think we have to think about, and this is a big debate that I have with governments, is the importance of training, knowledge and understanding, and that whole process of actually what does a curriculum look like in the future, not what does it exist today. Even in the UK, we've been very good at reinventing ourselves from what was the first thing to do was industrial age, all the way through to being a service country. What I can see from a Spanish perspective is a huge amount of talent. What we have to do is make sure that it's movable, that it can be globalized in terms of moving people out, and I think you will see that shift. But we're also going to have to ask very simple questions about this concept of the universal basic income, this concept that actually we change the dynamics about what is important. Is it important to work 5 days a week? How do we shift this concept of capital, and who owns the capital, therefore, who is exploiting that capital? This concept of the universal basic income will be a discussion that goes on over the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know if Joan can talk about it from a business perspective, but it's an interesting debate to be had. We done? Thank you. Thank you.